The chandeliers shimmered like frozen rain above Salvatore's, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, a place where money whispered in Italian and danger came dressed in silk suits. Imani Brooks adjusted her apron for the third time that night, her hands trembling just enough to betray what she always tried to hide, how small she sometimes felt in rooms built for power. At 22, she'd learned to make herself invisible, smile when spoken to, move quietly, keep her head down. Because in a city like Chicago, attention could be dangerous, especially for a shy black girl trying to build a quiet life. The room hummed with the low conversation of men who never had to whisper their names. Then the air shifted, just a little colder, a little quieter. That's when he walked in. Luca Moretti. Even the name carried weight. He wasn't loud or flashy, he didn't need to be. Power clung to him like expensive cologne. Tall, controlled, sharp suit. The kind of man whose silence said more than most people's words ever could. Table 9 needs their wine refilled, her manager whispered. And Imani, please don't spill anything on Mr. Moretti this time. Her heart skipped. Table 9. Balancing the bottle of Barolo, Imani crossed the floor, her pulse loud in her ears. She'd almost reached the table when an elegant older woman caught her attention. Silver hair, gentle smile, eyes that glowed with kindness but moved too carefully, searching faces before reacting. Imani recognized the signs instantly. The woman was deaf. Without hesitation, she set the bottle down and smiled, her fingers already beginning to move. "Good evening," she signed with ease. "How may I help you?" The woman's eyes widened with pure joy. Her hands came alive, shaping words from air, about the risotto, about her late husband, about Naples and saffron and memories that lived in taste. Imani responded softly, hands flowing like music. The older woman laughed, a silent laugh, full of light, and the room around them stilled. Conversations faded. Glasses paused mid-air. Even the piano player stopped mid-note. For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed to listen, to two women speaking in silence, and as Imani laughed gently at something the woman signed, her voice carried warmth through the air, soft, rich, human. Then a voice behind her, low, deep, almost cautious. "You speak sign language?" Imani turned. Luca Moretti stood just inches away, his dark eyes studying her like she'd just done something impossible. "I do," she said softly. "Your mother wanted to compliment the chef." Luca's gaze didn't waver. "You sign beautifully," he said. His tone was unreadable, somewhere between admiration and interrogation. Almost like someone who's been hiding in plain sight. Imani's smile faltered. "It's just something I picked up," she murmured. But Luca didn't believe that. She could see it in his eyes, the kind of eyes that didn't just look, they searched. And in that instant, the room suddenly felt smaller, colder. Because when a man like Luca Moretti started paying attention, it wasn't always a compliment. It could be the start of something much bigger, something that might save her or destroy her. And maybe you felt it too. That one moment when someone looked at you and saw past the mask you wear, past the polite smile, straight into who you really are. Was it thrilling or terrifying? For the rest of that evening, Imani couldn't shake the feeling that Luca Moretti's eyes were still on her. Even after he and his mother left, her hands trembled as she cleared their table. The air where he'd stood felt heavier somehow, like he'd left behind more than just the scent of expensive cologne, like he'd left a question she couldn't stop hearing. Who was she really hiding from? By midnight, Salvatore's was nearly empty. The soft hum of the dishwasher filled the silence, and Imani sat alone on a stool near the staff lockers, untangling her apron strings. Her shift shoes pinched her feet. And her mind replayed that moment, Luca's words echoing like a quiet storm, almost like someone who's been hiding in plain sight. She didn't know why it rattled her so deeply. Maybe because it was true. By day, she was just another college student, studying linguistics and working nights to pay for tuition. But beneath that normal life was a story no one in Chicago knew. When she was 12, her older brother Malik had lost his hearing in a shooting that tore their family apart. The doctors had called it collateral damage. Imani called it the day the world stopped making sense. While other kids learned TikTok dances and pop songs, she spent hours on YouTube teaching herself American Sign Language, fingers aching, eyes red, until she could talk to her brother again. Signing became her second language, her second voice. Her second chance to say everything she'd been too afraid to before. And maybe that's why she'd recognized the loneliness in Luca's mother so easily. Maybe she saw a piece of Malik in her, someone who had learned to live in silence while the world moved too fast to care. Still, it didn't explain him. Why would a man like Luca Moretti, a man whose name carried both power and danger, notice a woman like her? She told herself it didn't matter. He was just another customer. Another reminder that she didn't belong in places like Salvatore's. But deep down, she felt something shifting. A quiet curiosity mixed with a warning her mother used to whisper whenever she got too close to trouble. Baby, some fires don't burn you right away. They lure you close with warmth first. The next morning came early, and so did the weight of reality. Imani's apartment was small, just 2 rooms and a flickering hallway light that buzzed when it rained. She brewed cheap coffee, stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, and tried to convince herself last night had been nothing. Just another shift, another night, another man who would forget her name by morning. But when she opened her locker at work later that day, a small white envelope fell out. Her name was written on it, neat, bold, and unfamiliar. Inside was a folded note in black ink. Thank you for seeing my mother. Few people ever do. LM, and tucked behind it, 2 crisp $100 bills. Imani stared at the note, her pulse rising. She should have felt grateful, maybe even flattered, but instead, she felt watched. That night she tried to convince herself the message was harmless, maybe even kind. But when she stepped onto the restaurant floor, she felt it, that same electric awareness crawling up her skin. He was there. Luca sat at his usual table, alone this time. No mother, no business partners, just him, hands folded, eyes fixed on her as if he'd been waiting. Table 9, whispered Heather, the senior waitress, her tone uneasy. He requested you. Requested her. Imani's throat went dry. She grabbed her notepad and approached. Her steps light but her heart pounding like it wanted out of her chest. Good evening, Mr. Moretti, she said softly. Would you like to start with your usual? Luca's gaze lifted. You remember my order? It's my job to, she replied. He smiled faintly, and something in that smile felt both dangerous and disarming. Then sit for a moment. I'd like to ask you something. Her breath caught. Sit? Employees didn't sit with guests. Not here. I really shouldn't. That wasn't a question, he said gently, though his tone left no room for refusal. She hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him. Her palms felt cold against her knees. Luca leaned forward slightly. Where did you learn to sign like that? Her throat tightened. My brother, she said after a beat. He's deaf. I taught myself when we were kids. He nodded slowly. That explains the fluency, but not the restraint. The what? The way you move, Luca said quietly. You sign like someone who's been trained to listen before speaking, to observe, to stay unseen until necessary. Imani's breath stilled. He was reading her like a book she didn't remember opening. I'm not hiding anything, she whispered. Maybe not, Luca said softly. But you're protecting something. Their eyes met, his calm, hers uncertain. And in that locked moment, something unspoken passed between them, something that felt like recognition. After he left, Imani sat in the staff restroom, staring at her reflection again. Not the face, but the eyes. She didn't know why Luca's words unsettled her so deeply. Maybe it was because he wasn't wrong. She was protecting something. Her brother, her privacy, her peace. And maybe herself, too, from ever trusting anyone again. She leaned her head back, exhaling shakily. It's funny how one moment can shift everything. One person looks at you, really looks, and suddenly, your walls feel thin. Maybe you felt that too. That strange pull between fear and curiosity, when someone starts seeing the things you work so hard to hide. Sometimes it feels like danger, sometimes it feels like destiny, and sometimes you can't tell the difference until it's too late. The following week passed in a blur of routine, but on Thursday night, as rain streaked down the windows, Imani felt the shift again. Luca returned, but not alone this time. He sat with 2 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The air around them was thick, sharp, not just business, something heavier. As Imani refilled their glasses, she heard one of them mutter under his breath, "We can't keep stalling. Flanagan's getting impatient." Luca's tone was calm but cutting. "Then tell Flanagan I don't negotiate through middlemen." The other man's jaw tightened. "He's not gonna like that." "Neither do I." Imani froze mid-pour. Flanagan, she knew that name. Her brother had whispered it once. A man who controlled half of South Chicago. The kind of man her mother warned her never to cross paths with. She stepped back quickly, pretending to tidy a nearby table, her mind racing. What was Luca involved in? And what did it have to do with the people her family used to avoid at all costs? Before she could retreat, Luca's eyes found her again. Sharp as glass, but softer this time, as if he already knew she'd overheard. "Everything okay, Miss Brooks?" "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. "Just refilling water." But her heart said otherwise. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every detail. His mother's smile, Luca's gaze, that name, Flanagan. For years, she'd done everything to build a life far away from danger. But the universe had a way of circling back to the things you tried hardest to escape. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. Maybe that's how it always starts. Not with fireworks, not with danger, but with curiosity. A glance that lingers too long. A question you shouldn't answer. And before you know it, fate has already decided to make your life interesting, whether you're ready or not. 3 days passed, 3 long days of silence. No Luca, no mysterious notes, no watchful eyes tracking her every move across the dining room. And just when Imani started to believe the moment had passed, that the air around her might finally settle, he came back. This time it wasn't his presence that chilled her. It was what followed. Friday night at Salvatore's had its own rhythm. The clinking of wine glasses, the laughter of people who'd never known hunger, the scent of rosemary and garlic drifting through the golden air. Imani moved quietly among them, tray balanced on one hand, smile as polite as always. But underneath the surface, something was off. It started with the black SUV parked across the street, the windows tinted too dark, the engine running even though it hadn't moved in an hour. Then she saw Luca, sitting alone at his usual table. No drink, no phone, just stillness, watching, waiting. Their eyes met, and 1,000 unspoken questions filled the space between them. Imani's stomach tightened. The last time he'd looked at her that way, it had been curiosity. Tonight, it felt like warning. "Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you when you have a moment," her manager murmured as he passed by. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "And Imani, be careful." The word careful landed heavy in her chest. When she finally approached the table, Luca stood. Not just stood, rose. And somehow the simple act sent a ripple through the room. "Sit," he said quietly, motioning to the chair across from him. His tone wasn't sharp, but it carried authority that didn't need to raise its voice. "I can't," she started, glancing at the other guests. "I'm working." "Then consider this. Part of your shift." Something in his expression stopped her protest cold. Imani sat, slowly, carefully. The sound of rain began to patter against the tall windows. Luca leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. No rings, no flashy jewelry, just a sleek watch and the quiet confidence of a man used to secrets. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I want the truth." She nodded cautiously. "Why are there 2 men sitting outside in a car with Boston plates watching you?" Her blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "They're not mine. They've been out there for the past hour. One of them showed your picture to the maitre d' 10 minutes ago." Imani froze, her mind spinning. Boston plates. A picture of her. Her pulse hammered in her ears as her thoughts went back to the one place she'd spent years trying to forget. Boston. She swallowed hard. "You're mistaken. I don't know anyone from Boston." Luca sighed softly, leaning back in his chair. "That's the thing about lies, Miss Brooks. They only work when the person you're lying to wants to believe them." His tone wasn't cruel. If anything, it sounded weary, as if he'd seen too many truths disguised as kindness. Why would someone from Boston be looking for a waitress in Chicago? He continued. Her throat tightened. She had no answer that didn't risk everything, because the truth was, she did know who those men might be. And if she was right, it meant her past had finally found her. The door chimed. Imani turned, heart pounding. Two men in dark coats stepped inside, shaking rain from their shoulders. Their eyes scanned the room, slow, deliberate, searching. Her body went cold. She knew one of those faces, the scar over the right eyebrow, the same man who used to visit her neighborhood in Boston, collecting debts, making threats. Luca noticed the way her breathing changed, the way her hands started to shake. "Who are they?" he asked quietly. Imani's lips parted, but no sound came out. The men began walking toward the bar, pretending to browse the wine shelves. But their eyes weren't on the bottles. They were on her. Luca followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "What? Now, through the kitchen." "I can't just—" He stood suddenly, drawing all attention away from her. To anyone watching, it looked like a customer rising to pay his bill. But beneath the table, his hand slipped briefly into his jacket, and when it came back, she caught a glimpse of black metal. Her breath caught. "He's armed." Imani didn't move. Couldn't. The fear pinned her in place. Luca looked at her once more, the intensity in his eyes not anger, but something else, protectiveness. "Go," he said again, softer now. "Please." She backed away slowly, moving toward the kitchen doors, but before she could push through, one of the men at the bar turned, and their eyes met. Recognition flashed, then movement. Luca was faster. In one smooth motion, he reached inside his jacket, murmured something to the manager, and nodded toward the back hallway. The staff doors swung open just long enough for Imani to slip through before chaos began to stir behind her. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she raced down the narrow hallway lined with stacked wine crates. A tall man with dark hair waited near the exit, Luca's driver. "Miss Brooks?" he asked. She hesitated. "Who are you?" "Carlo. Mr. Moretti sent me. This way." He held the door open, revealing a sleek black SUV idling by the alley. Imani hesitated again. Every instinct screamed not to trust strangers, especially not ones tied to men like Luca Moretti. But the echo of footsteps from the restaurant made the decision for her. She ran. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain as the SUV sped away. Carlo said nothing, just drove through back streets until the skyline vanished behind them. Finally, he pulled into a gated driveway beside a lakeside property, secluded, quiet, safe. "Mr. Moretti will meet you here shortly," he said, unlocking the door. Imani stepped out, her shoes sinking into damp gravel. The night smelled like rain and pine. For the first time in hours, she could breathe, though not easily. Inside, the cabin was warm, rustic, lined with books and soft lights. On the mantel, photos of a smiling older woman, Luca's mother. It hit her then. This wasn't just some hideout. This was his sanctuary. Half an hour later, the door opened. Luca walked in, rain still clinging to his hair, the tension in his jaw barely contained. He didn't speak right away. "Who are those men, Imani?" he asked finally. She hesitated. "People I thought I'd escaped." "From Boston?" Her silence was his answer. "I don't need the whole story," Luca said quietly, "but I need to know if you're in danger." She met his gaze, steady now, though her hands still shook. "If they found me here, then yes, and anyone around me probably is too." A pause stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. "Then you'll stay here tonight," Luca said, decisive. "No arguments." "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." Luca's jaw flexed. "Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone's running from ghosts." For a long moment they stood there, two people from different worlds, bound by the same kind of silence. The storm outside beat against the windows, but inside, everything was still. And that's the thing about danger. It doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it shows up quietly, offering you shelter before it asks for your trust. Maybe that's what makes it so tempting. Because sometimes the person who saves you from the storm might be the storm. And maybe, just maybe, that's where love begins, right between fear and fascination. Have you ever had someone step into your chaos and calm it, even if you didn't trust them yet? It's strange how comfort and danger can wear the same face, isn't it? Maybe that's how the universe tests us, by sending the right people wrapped in the wrong timing. The morning light crept slowly through the lace curtains, brushing against Imani's face as she woke to the sound of birds and the distant hum of water lapping the shore. For a brief second, she forgot where she was. The room was soft and warm, the faint smell of coffee drifting through the air, a folded blanket resting neatly over her. Then it hit her. The night before, the chase, the men from Boston, the SUV, Luca. Imani sat up quickly, heart thudding. She was still in her clothes from the night before, shoes kicked off by the couch. The cabin was quiet, save for the faint crackle of a fire someone must have lit before dawn. A note sat on the coffee table. "There's breakfast in the kitchen. Don't leave until I return. LM." She stared at the neat handwriting, equal parts comforted and unsettled. The man terrified her. Yet something in his carefulness, the way he folded the blanket, the simplicity of his note, made it hard to see him only as danger. She moved to the kitchen, where a steaming pot of coffee waited beside 2 plates of scrambled eggs and fruit. He'd cooked. Imani smiled despite herself. "A dangerous man who makes breakfast," she murmured. "Now that's a plot twist." Hours passed before she heard the low growl of a car outside. The door opened, and Luca stepped in, wearing the same clothes from last night, though his shirt sleeves were rolled up now. A cut grazed his temple, faint but fresh. "You should have slept longer," he said, closing the door behind him. Imani crossed her arms. "You don't exactly give relaxing vacation vibes." He cracked a small smile at that, the kind that barely touched his lips but softened his eyes. "Fair enough." "Are they gone?" she asked quietly. "For now." "What does that mean?" "It means whoever sent them knows where you are," Luca said. "But they don't know you're with me. That gives us time." Imani frowned. "Time for what?" Luca hesitated. "To find out why they're looking for you." The words hit harder than she expected. He wasn't asking if there was a reason. He already knew there was. She turned away, staring at the fireplace. "You keep talking like you already know everything about me." "I don't," Luca replied evenly. "But I know fear when I see it. You've been running for a long time." Her silence said more than words could. Finally, she whispered, "When I left Boston, I swore I'd never look back. My brother and I grew up in the wrong neighborhood, wrong people, wrong promises. When he lost his hearing, everything changed. My mother begged me to stay out of that world. So I left, changed my name, started over." Luca listened, really listened, his gaze steady, not judgmental. "Who were the men?" he asked. "I'm not sure, but I know who sent them." Her voice trembled. "His name is Declan O'Rourke. He used to run with my father before he went to prison. I think they're looking for me because of something my father did years ago." Luca's brow furrowed. "O'Rourke works under Flanagan." Imani blinked. "That name again." He nodded grimly. "Flanagan's an old enemy of my family. Ruthless. He's been expanding into Chicago, trying to push me out. If your father had ties to him, that could explain why his men came after you." Imani's chest tightened. "So I'm caught between both of you? Him chasing me, you protecting me?" Luca's gaze softened. "I'm not your enemy, Imani." "I don't even know if I believe that." "Then believe this. Flanagan doesn't chase ghosts. If he sent men, it's because you have something he wants." The room fell into silence. Something inside Imani twisted. Fear, guilt, confusion, all tangled together. She thought about the shoebox under her bed back in her apartment, filled with old letters and one broken silver watch her father had given her before he disappeared. She thought about the last call she'd received from a blocked number a month ago, a voice that whispered her name before the line went dead. Maybe Luca was right. Maybe she did have something someone wanted. She just didn't know what it was yet. Later that afternoon, the rain returned. Imani sat by the window watching the gray waves roll against the dock. Luca stood behind her, phone pressed to his ear, speaking Italian in low, clipped tones. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tension in his shoulders, the danger in his stillness. When he hung up, she turned to face him. "You always this calm when people try to kill you?" He gave a dry laugh. "It's a learned skill." "Teach me sometime," she said quietly. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Luca didn't look like a man carved from marble and discipline. He looked human, tired, worn, but deeply alive. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "You're surprisingly calm, too." "I've had worse days." "Worse than last night?" She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what a woman can survive when she's used to being underestimated." Luca's gaze lingered on her then, longer than before. "What?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Just wondering," he said softly, "how many masks you've had to wear to stay safe." There was a beat of silence before she whispered, "Too many." He nodded slowly. "I know the feeling." That confession hung between them, heavy, honest, unguarded. The air changed again. Not romantic, not yet, but charged. The kind of moment that breathes slow, deliberate, unsure of whether to end or begin. Hours later, Luca's mother arrived. Imani hadn't expected her, but when the older woman stepped into the cabin, her eyes filled with warmth. She smiled, lifted her hands, and began to sign. "My son told me what happened. Are you all right?" Imani signed back. "I am now!" Luca's mother beamed. "You remind me of my sister, brave and stubborn. Luca never listens, but maybe he will listen to you." Imani laughed softly, and Luca's mother touched her cheek tenderly, a gesture of trust that melted something inside her. Watching them, Luca felt something shift too. For so long he'd lived in a world where loyalty was currency, where softness was a liability. But here, in this quiet cabin, between his mother's grace and Imani's courage, he saw a different kind of strength. That night, after his mother retired to the guest room, Luca and Imani sat outside under the covered porch. The rain had stopped. The lake shimmered like black glass beneath the moonlight. "Do you ever wish you'd chosen a different life?" Imani asked softly. "All the time," Luca said. "But wishing doesn't undo bloodlines." She looked at him, really looked, at the faint scar above his brow, the tired edge behind his charm. "You don't seem like the man they say you are." "And what do they say?" "That you're dangerous, cold, untouchable." He smiled faintly. "Then they've never seen me make breakfast." She laughed quietly, then turned serious again. "What about you? What do you see when you look at me?" Luca studied her for a long moment before answering. "Someone who's been silenced, but never broken." A quiet stillness followed, the kind that hums between two people standing too close to something they don't yet understand. And maybe that's the strangest part about connection. It doesn't always arrive when life is peaceful. Sometimes it shows up in the middle of chaos, sits beside you, and refuses to leave. Because maybe, just maybe, the people meant to heal you arrive right after the ones who tried to hurt you. Isn't it wild how life works like that sometimes? How the same storm that tries to drown you ends up washing someone to your shore. Someone who sees you differently, even when you don't see yourself clearly yet? Morning crept in quiet and silver. The lake lay still, the air cold enough to mist the windows of the cabin. Imani woke before the sun, the smell of coffee already drifting from the kitchen. Luca was there, sleeves rolled up, reading something on his phone. The look on his face stopped her halfway down the stairs. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He just turned the screen toward her. It was a news headline. "Boston crime family collapse. O'Rourke associates under investigation." Her heart stuttered. The article mentioned names she hadn't heard in years. Men who used to sit in her father's living room whispering deals while she did homework in the hallway. "Someone's cleaning house," Luca said quietly. "Half the old crew's gone underground. But here's what's strange. Your name came up." Imani's stomach dropped. "What? Why would—" He cut her off gently. "Because a transfer of funds from one of their offshore accounts went to a name that matches yours. Not the new one, your old one." Her hands began to tremble. "That's impossible. I don't have anything from them. Then someone's using your name. She backed away a little, pressing a hand to her forehead. This can't be happening. I left all that behind. I believe you, Luca said. But the people chasing you won't. Imani paced, her voice breaking. So what? You think my father's enemies are using me as bait? Maybe. Luca's tone was calm, too calm. Or maybe someone's trying to send me a message. She stopped cold. What kind of message? He hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, Luca looked unsure. Imani, he said slowly. What I didn't tell you is that my family and the O'Rourkes, your father's people, have crossed paths before. Not just as rivals. There was a truce once, years ago. Her heart pounded. My father never mentioned that. Because it ended badly, Luca said. Your father accused my uncle of breaking the deal. 2 men died that night. Since then, our families have stayed far apart. Until now. Imani's mind raced. You think this money, this mess, is about revenge? Not exactly, Luca said. But someone wants to resurrect that old feud. And the easiest way to do that is to use you. She felt dizzy, gripping the edge of the counter. So I'm just a weapon to them. A pawn. Not to me, he said quietly. The words hung there, heavier than the silence that followed. For the first time, Imani saw the crack in his armor, the part of him that didn't belong to the world of suits and silence. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why help me? Why risk all this? He looked at her then, really looked. Because I owe a debt. To who? To your father. Imani blinked. That's not possible. But Luca nodded. Before he went to prison, your father saved my mother's life. You didn't know? She shook her head. He never told me. He wouldn't have, Luca said. He didn't want it known that he'd helped the enemy. But without him, she wouldn't be alive today. So when I realized who you were, he paused. I couldn't ignore it. The room tilted around her. All this time she'd thought Luca's interest was curiosity, or worse, manipulation. But now she saw it for what it was. Obligation tangled with something deeper, something neither of them could name yet. She swallowed hard. You could have told me. I wanted to, he said. But I didn't know if you'd trust me. I still don't know if I do. He gave a half smile, tired but honest. Then at least trust that I don't want to see you hurt. Outside, thunder rolled over the lake. The storm came fast, the kind that turns day to dusk in minutes. Luca's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. They found your apartment! Imani's eyes widened. What? My men just called. The place is trashed. Whoever it was took your laptop and a box from under your bed. She froze. The shoebox? What was in it? Letters, old ones, and a watch that used to belong to my father. Anything else? No. Just memories. Then they weren't after money, Luca muttered. They were after information. Imani sank onto the couch, tears burning behind her eyes. I can't keep doing this, Luca. Every time I run, they find me. Every time I start over, something pulls me back. He crouched beside her, voice low. Then stop running. Let me help you fight. She looked up, searching his face for any trace of deception. All she saw was conviction, maybe reckless, maybe real. Fight how? By finding out who's really behind this, he said. And we start with those letters. He stood, pulling on his jacket. I need to go back to your apartment, see what they left behind. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous. So is sitting here doing nothing. For a long moment they stared at each other, two stubborn souls at opposite ends of the same fear. Finally, Luca exhaled. Fine, but you do exactly what I say. The drive back into the city was tense, rain streaking across the windshield. Imani sat beside him, watching the buildings blur by. When they reached her street, her breath caught. Police tape fluttered in the wind. The door to her apartment hung open. Inside was chaos. Drawers pulled out, papers shredded, the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the air. Luca's men searched quietly while he examined the floor. He crouched near a small puddle of water beneath the window. They came in through here. Professional. Quick. Imani knelt beside him, noticing something half buried under a torn rug. A tiny silver drive, no bigger than a thumb. "Luca," she whispered. He took it carefully, sliding it into his pocket. "We'll check it back at the cabin." As they turned to leave, movement outside caught his eye. A shadow, fast, then gone. Luca grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind him just as a gunshot shattered the window. Glass exploded across the room. They dropped to the floor. "Stay down!" he shouted. Another shot rang out, splintering the doorframe. One of Luca's men fired back. Tires screeched outside, then silence. Imani's hands shook uncontrollably. Luca reached for her, gripping her arm. "You all right?" She nodded weakly, heart racing. "Good. Because whoever they are, they wanted to scare us, not kill us." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" she gasped. He managed a grim smile. "A little." Back at the cabin, the silver drive revealed its truth. On the screen were encrypted files, numbers, offshore accounts, digital signatures, all leading back to Flanagan. And one more surprise, a folder labeled Brooks. Inside were scanned letters, correspondence between her father and someone identified only by initials, LM. Imani looked at Luca sharply. "That's you!" He stared at the screen. "It can't be. I was a teenager when these were written." "Then who?" "My uncle," he said suddenly. "Lorenzo Moretti." Imani's breath hitched. "The one from the true story?" "Yes, and if these letters are real..." "Your father and my uncle were planning something together. A merger, not a feud. Someone wanted that alliance destroyed." "Flanagan," she whispered. Luca nodded slowly. "He killed my uncle to stop it. And now he's trying to erase everyone connected to them, including you." The realization settled like ash between them. Their families had never been enemies by fate. They'd been made enemies by manipulation. For years, both sides had lived by a lie. Luca leaned back, eyes dark with thought. "If we expose this, Flanagan loses everything. And if we don't, then he comes for you again." Imani looked out the window, the storm returning outside, waves crashing against the dock. She felt the weight of generations pressing on her shoulders. Maybe this was what destiny looked like. Messy, dangerous, full of truths you never asked to carry. She turned back to him, voice steady. "Then we finish what our fathers started." Luca met her gaze. Together. For a while they just sat there, the glow of the laptop painting their faces gold. Two people born on opposite sides of a story neither of them wrote, now forced to rewrite it themselves. And maybe that's what courage really is. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to walk toward the truth anyway. You ever notice how life sometimes circles you right back to the thing you swore you'd never face? Maybe it's not punishment, maybe it's the universe's way of saying, you're strong enough now. Because sometimes, the only way to end a story is to go back to where it began. Rain lashed the cabin windows until the sound turned into a single unbroken roar. Imani sat at the table with the laptop still glowing in front of her, its blue light carving tired shadows across her face. She hadn't spoken in a while, neither had Luca. The files they'd just opened had changed everything. All those years she thought her father was the villain in someone else's story. But now she saw he'd been trying to build peace, and had died for it. The thought hollowed her out. "Are you sure Flanagan killed your uncle?" she asked quietly. Luca rubbed a hand over his jaw. "The evidence points to him, but I need proof before I move. If we're wrong, people die." His voice was calm, but his eyes gave him away. He was scared, not of Flanagan, but of failing the one chance to end a war that had outlived them both. They worked until the storm became a low hum in the distance. Imani scrolled through the last folder on the drive, her stomach tightening as she found an old photograph. Two men shaking hands. Her father, Luca's uncle, and behind them, barely visible, stood Declan O'Rourke, her father's right-hand man, the same man now hunting her. Luca leaned closer. "That's your Declan?" "Yes." "Then he's the key. If he's still alive, he knows who paid for those hits." Imani nodded slowly. "But how do we find him before he finds us?" Before Luca could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the power went out completely. The room fell into black silence except for the wind. Luca reached for the drawer, pulled out a flashlight, and motioned for her to stay behind him. A low hum outside, tires on gravel. Imani's breath hitched. Someone's here. Luca moved to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain. A pair of headlights cut through the rain, stopping just short of the porch. "Stay low," he whispered. But the knock that followed wasn't violent. It was steady, deliberate. "Luca, it's Carlo," a muffled voice called. "Power line's down on the road. You good in there?" Luca exhaled. "It's all right." He opened the door, letting his driver in, drenched from the storm. Carlo shook off his coat. "Lines are out for miles. I brought fuel for the generator." Then his eyes caught the glow of the laptop screen. "You find what you were looking for?" "Too much," Luca replied. Carlo gave a low whistle. "Then we better move fast. Word on the street is Flanagan's men are restless. They never saw it coming." The first shot cracked the air before any of them registered the sound. Glass shattered. Carlo spun sideways, collapsing against the wall. "Carlo!" Imani screamed. Luca pulled her to the floor, dragging her behind the couch as more bullets tore through the cabin. "Stay down!" he shouted, firing back through the window. Rain mixed with gunfire, thunder mixing with screams. Carlo was breathing, but barely. Blood spreading through his shirt. "Who are they?" Imani gasped. Luca reloaded, jaw tight. "Flanagan's people. They must have tracked the drive signal." He fired again, then grabbed Imani's wrist. "We need to get out now." They crawled toward the back door, Luca shielding her as wood splintered overhead. Outside, the cold air hit like knives. They sprinted across the wet grass toward the boathouse. Luca shoved open the door and pushed her inside. "Down!" The gunfire faded behind them. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain hitting the tin roof and their ragged breathing. Carlo's voice crackled through Luca's earpiece. "Go! They're surrounding!" His words cut out. Luca slammed a fist against the wall. Imani placed a trembling hand on his arm. "We can't just leave him. He'd tell me to keep you alive," Luca said bitterly. She stared at him. "And what about you?" He met her gaze. "I stopped worrying about myself the moment you walked into that restaurant." Her throat closed. "Don't say that." "It's the truth." Lightning flashed, lighting up the space between them. The tension, the exhaustion, the thin thread of trust that still held. "Imani," he said softly, "if I don't make it, stop. Listen to me." "No." Tears burned her eyes. "We're not doing the goodbye thing. You're not dying here." He gave a faint smile. "You really think you can tell me what to do?" "Yes." For a second, even through the chaos, they almost laughed. They stayed there until the storm quieted. Then, slowly, Luca opened the boathouse door. The cabin was smoke and ruin. The men were gone, leaving only tire marks in the mud. Carlo lay inside, pale but alive. "Told you, I don't go down easy," he rasped. Imani pressed her shaking hands against his wound, whispering prayers under her breath. Luca radioed for help, his voice breaking for the first time all night. And that's when she realized he wasn't untouchable. He was terrified of losing the few good things left in his world. Maybe that's what made him human after all. By dawn, they'd moved Carlo to a safe house. The cabin was gone, burned before the authorities arrived. Everything they had, files, proof, safety, turned to ash. Back in the city, they hid in an abandoned hotel Luca's family used years ago. Imani stood by a cracked window staring at the skyline. "We lost everything." "Not everything," Luca said behind her. He handed her a small object, the silver watch from the shoebox. She gasped. "How?" "It was under Carlo's seat in the SUV. He must have grabbed it before the attack." Imani turned it over in her palm. The glass face was cracked, but inside was something she'd never noticed before, a hidden engraving. She squinted. L+P-O peace. Her heart clenched. "Lorenzo and Patrick, our fathers." "Guess they believed it was possible once," Luca said softly. She looked up at him. "Do you still?" His answer came without hesitation. "I have to. Otherwise, none of this means anything." For the next few days, they barely slept. Luca called in favors, chased leads, pieced together fragments of truth. Every road led back to Flanagan. Every whisper said the same thing. He was planning something big, a sit-down with what was left of both families. Imani knew what that meant, a trap. We can't let him do this, she said. Luca nodded. Then we make him come to us. How? By giving him what he wants. He met her eyes. You. Her breath caught. No. It's the only way. He wants to use you to reopen the war. We flip it. Make him confess instead. You're asking me to walk into the fire. I'm asking you to trust me. She closed her eyes, fighting the panic rising in her chest. All her life she'd been running from violence, from her father's shadow. And now she was about to step straight into it. But then she remembered her brother's voice the night she left home. You always run toward the people who need saving, Imani. Maybe one day you'll let someone run toward you. She opened her eyes. All right. Tell me the plan. That night, as she prepared herself, Luca stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer like scattered diamonds. I never asked for this life, he said quietly. I just kept inheriting other people's mistakes. Imani joined him. Maybe that's all any of us are doing, trying to rewrite the stories we were born into. He turned toward her. And what story are you writing? One where I finally stopped being afraid. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of everything unsaid filling the space. Then slowly, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Outside, the storm clouds drifted east, leaving behind a fragile stillness, like the breath before a confession. Funny how the darkest nights always feel endless until the first hint of light breaks through. Maybe that's why life puts us through them, so we can see who's still standing beside us when the sky finally clears. Because sometimes the people we fear most become the ones we can't imagine losing. The city didn't sleep that night, but Imani did, for the first time in days. Just an hour. One fragile hour of peace before the next storm. When she woke, sunlight spilled through the cracked hotel blinds, painting soft stripes across the floor. Luca sat in the corner, still in yesterday's clothes, his head bowed, elbows on his knees. The look on his face wasn't fear. It was resolve. You didn't sleep, she murmured. He gave a faint smile. Didn't want to. Because of the plan? Because of what comes after. Imani pushed herself upright, heart already thudding. Then let's make sure there is an after. They spread papers across the table, old letters, digital printouts, the photograph of their father's handshake. Somewhere in all that evidence was the key to ending a war. Imani traced a trembling finger along the inscription inside the cracked watch. L plus P cross peace. What if it's not just initials? She whispered. What if it's a code? Luca frowned. Go on. My father taught me sign language, remember? He said sometimes messages hide in the simplest symbols. She flipped the watch open. Inside, beneath the second hand, tiny notches formed a pattern. Dots and dashes. Morse code, Luca said, leaning closer. Imani grabbed a notepad, translating. Her hands shook, but the message took shape, letter by letter. Doc 42. The truth is buried where we met peace. She looked up. Doc 42, that's where our fathers signed the truce, isn't it? Luca nodded slowly. Then that's where this ends. By afternoon, clouds gathered again, bruised and heavy. Imani tied her hair back, pulling on a dark coat. Are you sure about this? Luca asked, loading his pistol, slipping it beneath his jacket. No, she said honestly, but being afraid hasn't saved me yet. He studied her a long moment, then nodded. Whatever happens, you stay behind me. She met his gaze. You'll have to keep up. Dock 42 smelled of rain and rust. The water slapped against wood pilings, seagulls circling above the silent warehouses. Imani followed Luca through the fog until they reached a metal door half buried behind stacks of forgotten crates. He forced it open. The hinges screamed. Inside was darkness, and a single light bulb swaying from the ceiling. A table sat in the center, covered with papers sealed in plastic. Imani approached slowly, heart pounding. What is this place? Luca scanned the documents. Financial records. Shipping manifests, all signed by Flanagan. These are your father's copies. Proof that Flanagan staged the betrayal. She blinked hard as the weight of years lifted off her shoulders. He died trying to protect this. Before Luca could answer, a voice echoed from the shadows. Well, isn't that touching? Flanagan stepped forward, flanked by 2 armed men. His grin was wide, cruel. "I was wondering who'd break the seal first," he said. "Should have guessed the Moretti boy and the girl with the famous last name." Luca's hand moved subtly toward his jacket. "You're late." "Traffic," Flanagan said dryly, then turned his gaze on Imani. "You look just like him, you know. Same eyes, same stubborn streak." "Then you know how this ends," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. He chuckled. "You think I came here to talk? You two should have stayed ghosts." Luca fired first, one clean shot that sent chaos rippling through the room. Imani ducked behind the table as bullets splintered wood. Papers scattered like snow. When the noise slowed, she crawled toward the far corner, searching for something, anything to fight back. Her fingers brushed metal, a fallen flashlight. She clicked it on and caught sight of the watch lying on the floor where it had fallen from her coat pocket. The cracked glass caught the light, reflecting against a steel drum nearby. An idea sparked. She grabbed it, twisted the dial until it clicked, and hurled it against the drum. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot from the opposite side. Flanagan turned instinctively. Luca moved in the distraction, striking fast, disarming the nearest guard. The fight was brutal but quick. When the dust settled, Flanagan was on his knees, gun knocked from his hand, Luca's weapon trained on his chest. Imani stood behind them, breathing hard. "Go on," Flanagan sneered. "Pull the trigger, boy. Be just like your father." Luca's hand trembled, but not from fear. "My father built an empire on blood. I'm ending it with truth." He tossed a small recording device onto the table. "Every word you've said is already on record, and by now it's halfway to the feds." Flanagan's smile faltered. "You think they'll believe the son of a criminal?" Imani stepped forward. "No, but they'll believe the daughter of a man you murdered." For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Flanagan laughed, a hollow, rattling sound, and lunged. The gun went off. Once. Silence followed. Imani's heart stopped until she saw the truth. Luca was standing. Flanagan wasn't. He dropped the pistol, chest rising and falling. Imani rushed to him, eyes wide. "Are you hit?" He shook his head, voice rough. "No. You?" "I'm fine." Outside, sirens began to wail, distant but growing. Luca turned to her, his voice almost a whisper. "It's over!" She looked at him. Blood, rain, exhaustion, and nodded. "No, it's just beginning." Hours later, the dock was a mess of flashing lights. Police, reporters, men in suits. Luca kept his promise. The files and recordings reached the authorities before anyone could twist the story. By dawn, Flanagan's empire was done. And for the first time in years, Imani felt the world shift. Not in fear, but in freedom. Days passed. Carlo recovered. The Moretti estate reopened its doors, not for business, but for rebuilding. Imani stood in the rose garden with Luca's mother, helping prune the blooms weighed down by rain. "You were brave," the older woman signed. "Luca told me everything." Imani smiled, her hands answering softly. "He gives me too much credit." "No," his mother replied. "He gives you exactly what you deserve. Honor." Luca appeared on the path, still bandaged, his usual composure softened by fatigue. He stopped beside them, meeting Imani's eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. "Your father would be proud." She smiled faintly. "He'd probably just tell me to stop running late for work." They both laughed. The kind of laugh that comes after too much loss. The kind that means you're still alive. That evening, they walked by the lake where it all began. The sky glowed pink and gold, the city far behind them. "You could leave, you know," Luca said. "You're free now. No one's chasing you." "I thought about it," she admitted. "But freedom isn't just running away, Luca. It's choosing where to stand." He looked at her, the faintest smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "And where do you stand?" "Right here." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of roses and rain, and the water caught the last light of the setting sun. Luca reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Soft reflection woven in. Funny thing about courage. It doesn't arrive in grand moments. It sneaks in quietly, disguised as choice. Sometimes it's saying no to fear. Sometimes it's saying yes to the person who stood beside you through it. Imani looked at Luca and realized courage had never been about standing alone. It was about learning to trust that someone else could carry the silence with you and still see your light. They stood there until the stars came out, two people bound by history, but free enough to write something new. The war that began with their fathers ended with them, not in blood, but in understanding. And maybe that's what peace truly is, not forgetting where you came from, but choosing to be better than the world that made you. You ever notice how the hardest fights aren't always against other people? Sometimes the real battle is with the part of you that still believes you're broken. But once you face that version of yourself and win, every storm after feels smaller. The city didn't sleep that night, but Imani did. For the first time in days, just an hour, one fragile hour of peace before the next storm. When she woke, sunlight spilled through the cracked hotel blinds, painting soft stripes across the floor. Luca sat in the corner, still in yesterday's clothes, his head bowed, elbows on his knees. The look on his face wasn't fear, it was resolve. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. He gave a faint smile. "Didn't want to. Because of the plan? Because of what comes after?" Imani pushed herself upright, heart already thudding. "Then let's make sure there is an after." They spread papers across the table, old letters, digital printouts, the photograph of their father's handshake. Somewhere in all that evidence was the key to ending a war. Imani traced a trembling finger along the inscription inside the cracked watch. L plus P us peace. "What if it's not just initials?" she whispered. "What if it's a code?" Luca frowned. "Go on. My father taught me sign language, remember? He said sometimes messages hide in the simplest symbols." She flipped the watch open. Inside, beneath the second hand, tiny notches formed a pattern, dots and dashes. "Morse code," Luca said, leaning closer. Imani grabbed a notepad, translating. Her hands shook, but the message took shape letter by letter. Doc 42. "The truth is buried where we met peace." She looked up. "Doc 42. That's where our fathers signed the truce, isn't it?" Luca nodded slowly. "Then that's where this ends." By afternoon, clouds gathered again, bruised and heavy. Imani tied her hair back, pulling on a dark coat. "Are you sure about this?" Luca asked, loading his pistol, slipping it beneath his jacket. "No," she said honestly, "but being afraid hasn't saved me yet." He studied her a long moment, then nodded. "Whatever happens, you stay behind me." She met his gaze. "You'll have to keep up." Dock 42 smelled of rain and rust. The water slapped against wood pilings, seagulls circling above the silent warehouses. Imani followed Luca through the fog until they reached a metal door half buried behind stacks of forgotten crates. He forced it open. The hinges screamed. Inside was darkness, and a single light bulb swaying from the ceiling. A table sat in the center, covered with papers sealed in plastic. Imani approached slowly, heart pounding. "What is this place?" Luca scanned the documents. Financial records, shipping manifests, all signed by Flanagan. "These are your father's copies, proof that Flanagan staged the betrayal." She blinked hard as the weight of years lifted off her shoulders. "He died trying to protect this." Before Luca could answer, a voice echoed from the shadows. "Well, isn't that touching?" Flanagan stepped forward, flanked by two armed men. His grin was wide, cruel. "I was wondering who'd break the seal first," he said. "Should have guessed the Moretti boy and the girl with the famous last name." Luca's hand moved subtly toward his jacket. "You're late." "Traffic," Flanagan said dryly, then turned his gaze on Imani. "You look just like him, you know. Same eyes, same stubborn streak." "Then you know how this ends," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. He chuckled. "You think I came here to talk? You two should have stayed ghosts." Luca fired first, one clean shot that sent chaos rippling through the room. Imani ducked behind the table as bullets splintered wood. Papers scattered like snow. When the noise slowed, she crawled toward the far corner, searching for something, anything to fight back. Her fingers brushed metal. A fallen flashlight. She clicked it on and caught sight of the watch lying on the floor where it had fallen from her coat pocket. The cracked glass caught the light, reflecting against a steel drum nearby. An idea sparked. She grabbed it, twisted the dial until it clicked, and hurled it against the drum. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot from the opposite side. Flanagan turned instinctively. Luca moved in the distraction, striking fast, disarming the nearest guard. The fight was brutal, but quick. When the dust settled, Flanagan was on his knees, gun knocked from his hand, Luca's weapon trained on his chest. Imani stood behind them, breathing hard. "Go on," Flanagan sneered. "Pull the trigger, boy. Be just like your father." Luca's hand trembled, but not from fear. "My father built an empire on blood. I'm ending it with truth." He tossed a small recording device onto the table. "Every word you've said is already on record, and by now it's halfway to the feds." Flanagan's smile faltered. "You think they'll believe the son of a criminal?" Imani stepped forward. "No, but they'll believe the daughter of a man you murdered." For a moment nobody breathed. Then Flanagan laughed, a hollow, rattling sound, and lunged. The gun went off. Once. Silence followed. Imani's heart stopped until she saw the truth. Luca was standing. Flanagan wasn't. He dropped the pistol, chest rising and falling. Imani rushed to him, eyes wide. "Are you hit?" He shook his head, voice rough. "No." "You?" "I'm fine." Outside, sirens began to wail, distant but growing. Luca turned to her, his voice almost a whisper. "It's over." She looked at him. Blood, rain, exhaustion, and nodded. "No, it's just beginning." Hours later, the dock was a mess of flashing lights. Police, reporters, men in suits. Luca kept his promise. The files and recordings reached the authorities before anyone could twist the story. By dawn, Flanagan's empire was done. And for the first time in years, Imani felt the world shift. Not in fear, but in freedom. Days passed. Carlo recovered. The Moretti estate reopened its doors, not for business, but for rebuilding. Imani stood in the rose garden with Luca's mother, helping prune the blooms weighed down by rain. "You were brave," the older woman signed. "Luca told me everything." Imani smiled, her hands answering softly. "He gives me too much credit." "No," his mother replied. "He gives you exactly what you deserve. Honor." Luca appeared on the path, still bandaged, his usual composure softened by fatigue. He stopped beside them, meeting Imani's eyes. "You did it," he said quietly. "Your father would be proud." She smiled faintly. "He'd probably just tell me to stop running late for work." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after too much loss, the kind that means you're still alive. That evening, they walked by the lake where it all began. The sky glowed pink and gold, the city far behind them. "You could leave, you know," Luca said. "You're free now. No one's chasing you." "I thought about it," she admitted. "But freedom isn't just running away, Luca. It's choosing where to stand." He looked at her, the faintest smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "And where do you stand?" "Right here." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of roses and rain, and the water caught the last light of the setting sun. Luca reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, soft reflection woven in. Funny thing about courage. It doesn't arrive in grand moments. It sneaks in quietly, disguised as choice. Sometimes it's saying no to fear. Sometimes it's saying yes to the person who stood beside you through it. Imani looked at Luca and realized courage had never been about standing alone. It was about learning to trust that someone else could carry the silence with you and still see your light. They stood there until the stars came out, two people bound by history but free enough to write something new. The war that began with their fathers ended with them, not in blood, but in understanding. And maybe that's what peace truly is. Not forgetting where you came from, but choosing to be better than the world that made you. You ever notice how the hardest fights aren't always against other people? Sometimes the real battle is with the part of you that still believes you're broken. But once you face that version of yourself and win, every storm after feels smaller. The following weeks unfolded like a long exhale after years of holding breath. The chaos was over, but healing took time. Imani stayed in Chicago for the hearings. The FBI raided Flanagan's remaining properties. And for the first time, Both the Moretti and Brooks names stood for something other than fear. Luca had testified in secret, his words quiet but decisive. The world would never know how much he gave up to end the violence that made him who he was. Imani sat through it all. Courtrooms, press noise, cold hallways that smelled like stale coffee, and every time she caught his eyes across the crowd, she felt steadier, like she'd found an anchor in the middle of a storm that once tried to drown her. One morning, after weeks of silence, a small envelope arrived at her apartment door. No return address, just her name written in tight, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the Dock 42, bathed in sunlight. On the back, a message. The truth brought peace. Maybe now you can find yours. LM. Her breath caught. Luca hadn't disappeared. He'd just stepped back, and somehow that made her smile. Because peace wasn't always about holding on. It was about knowing when to let go. Days turned into weeks. The restaurant reopened under new management, and Imani returned to her job, apron tied neatly around her waist, hair pulled into a soft bun. Customers came and went, faces she knew and faces she'd never see again. But she moved differently now, lighter, freer. The other waitresses noticed. "Girl, you've been smiling at nobody all week," one teased. Imani laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe I'm just learning how to smile for myself." It was a Friday night when she saw him again. She was clearing a table near the window when a familiar shadow crossed the marble floor. A tall figure in a navy coat, posture calm but unmistakable. Her heart skipped, then raced. Luca. He looked different, softer around the edges, a faint stubble shading his jaw, the weight of violence no longer sitting heavy in his eyes. "Table for one?" she asked, forcing a steady tone, though her hands trembled. He smiled faintly. "Not unless you're joining me." Her lips parted in surprise. "You can't just walk in here like nothing happened." He shrugged, that quiet confidence returning. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. You burned down half a cabin and disappeared for 2 months." He smiled wider. "And yet, you still remember." She rolled her eyes, but the warmth in her chest betrayed her. "Sit down before I change my mind." Dinner was quiet, but full. The kind of silence that doesn't demand words. He told her about Italy, how he'd gone back to tie up the family's affairs, how he planned to turn their old shipping fronts into legitimate businesses. "You're rebuilding the Moretti name," she said softly. "Trying to," he replied. "But I didn't come back for that." "Then why?" He looked at her, steady and unguarded. "To see if you found what you were looking for." She smiled faintly. "Peace, right?" "Yeah." She tilted her head. "I think I did." He nodded. "Then maybe I can stop pretending I didn't miss you." Her breath caught. "You're not pretending very well." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. "Maybe I'm done pretending altogether." After the restaurant closed, they walked by the river, the same river where everything began. The city lights shimmered across the surface, and for once, there was no tension in the air, just quiet understanding. Luca stopped by the railing, pulling something from his pocket. It was the cracked watch, restored, gleaming softly under the lamplight. "You kept it?" she asked. "Had it repaired?" he said. "Figured the past deserved a second chance, too." He turned the watch over. The engraving was still there, but now a new line curved beneath it. L+I, peace. Imani laughed softly, a tear catching the corner of her eye. "You really had to engrave it?" "I did," he said, "because you reminded me what peace actually means." She tilted her head. "And what's that?" He looked at her with quiet certainty. "It's not the absence of chaos. It's the presence of someone worth enduring it for." The world seemed to still around them. The hum of the city, the ripple of water, the faint sound of distant jazz. It all faded into one soft heartbeat. And when he leaned in, the kiss wasn't cinematic or dramatic. It was simple, human. The kind of kiss that rewrites everything without saying a word. Later, they sat on a park bench watching the skyline glow. Luca's arm rested around her shoulders, her head on his chest. "I don't know where life goes after this," she murmured. "Forward," he said. "And if forward looks different for us?" "Then we make it fit," he whispered. We've been rewriting rules since the day we met. She smiled, eyes drifting toward the horizon. Guess that's our thing. Sometimes life doesn't hand you a fair story. It hands you fragments, pieces that don't seem to fit until someone walks in and helps you see the picture clearly. And maybe that's all love really is. Two people agreeing to stop hiding, to stand in the light together, no matter how many storms it took to get there. Weeks later, Imani's small apartment felt different, lighter. The radio played softly in the background as she packed boxes, one labeled past, one labeled next. Luca appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. Moving day already? She smiled. I told you, if you can rebuild an empire, I can handle a new zip code. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. You sure about this? I'm sure about you. He kissed her forehead. Then that's all I need. That night before they left, Imani walked down to the old dock one last time. The water was calm, the moonlight soft across the surface. She held the watch in her hand and whispered to the wind. Thank you, Daddy, for showing me how to find peace even in the noise. Then she slipped the watch into her pocket and smiled through her tears. When she turned back, Luca was there, waiting at the edge of the path. And just like that night so long ago, she reached for him. Except this time, she wasn't afraid. If you've ever been through something that almost broke you, maybe you know this feeling. The quiet moment after the storm, when you realize you're still standing. Tell me, have you ever had to rebuild your piece by piece, just like Imani did? Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is start again, with open hands, not clenched fists. As they walked away from the dock, dawn began to bloom across the sky, orange melting into rose, light touching everything the darkness had tried to claim. Imani looked back once, just to remember how far she'd come. Then she slipped her hand into Luca's, and together they walked toward whatever tomorrow wanted to give them. The world didn't need to know their story. But for them, it was enough that peace had finally found a home. And maybe that's where every love story should end. Not in perfection, but in promise. Because love isn't about who rescues who. It's about who stays when the silence comes, and chooses to build something gentle out of the ruins. So, if you're listening right now, ask yourself, what's the one piece of peace you owe yourself today? Drop it in the comments, and maybe, just maybe, someone else will find their light through your words. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.